In my mind's eye, I just imagine us throwing the double doors open of one of our big rooms at Patton Harrisburg, and everybody kind of walking in. So for those of you that are logging in to join us this afternoon for our webinar, thank you so much. Just as we would in person, we want to give everybody a moment to kind of grab a seat virtually, and we'll get started. As you are coming in, if you haven't noticed, this Zoom session is set up as a webinar. So you'll notice that your microphone and your video are turned off by default. These sessions may get quite large. We're already over at 100 folks. But you do have access to the question and answer box if you're using a device with video. So if you'd like to enter a question into that box, we'll try to get to it during the session, but if not, hopefully we can post an answer to our shared notes doc, which is our ongoing document that we use to collect resources, the recordings for these events, as well as our presenters' slides. The link to our shared notes doc is presented here on the screen. That is a shortened link, that tiny URL, but it is also posted in the chat window as the full original link. So if you are on a network or a domain that doesn't really like those shortcut links, you will be able to grab that full link out of the chat window. So it looks like the line of folks coming in through the doors per se is slowing down a little bit. And we love to have these monthly sessions. We hope that you'll continue registering for them each month, but they are short. So I don't want to waste much of our time. I know these topics are important to all of us involved. So it's my great pleasure to welcome back our featured speakers, Dr. Sean Smith and Dr. David Bateman. And they will kind of tag off and on with each other. I think you'll enjoy the conversation and the information they have to share this week about empowering and engaging families and other stakeholders along the lines of how do we support students with disabilities in the various learning models and instructional models that we're dealing with right now, with hybrid, completely virtual. We've heard it called a few other things. So that shared notes doc will be available still in the chat window if you'd like to grab that as we're going on. But for now, don't worry about attendance. We'll get to that towards the end of the session. And we'd like to hop right into our featured topics and our guests for the day. So Dr. Smith and Dr. Bateman, I throw it over to you to go ahead and share and get us started.
Well, great. So I'm going to share as soon as you free up the sharing there, Sarah. Thank you. And folks, the way we're going to structure things today is I'll get started, and then David, Dr. Bateman will finish. And so there we go. And I'm going to get myself over to the present mode. And Sarah, if you can give me a thumbs up, are you seeing my screen and all that? Great. So first of all, thank you so much, folks, for spending the limited time that you have in your very busy day with us, and I really appreciate it. So what we're going to try to do today is the following. We're going to try to kind of capture the connection between what we're doing as educators and working with families that we historically, of course, work with every school year. But this year, since March, it's been a little different. And so we want to capitalize on that, realizing at least what I'm going to talk about. I know we'll be hitting on a lot of things we're already doing. I hope to reinforce some things, make some additional connections, think about some technology tools to consider as well. Although I will reinforce that Patton has a number of technology tools at their resource hub, and we'll reinforce that a little bit later. And then from the IEP and from the disability law policy, where we go with the family, I'm going to allow David to kind of focus in on that on the latter part of this session. So if that helps. Now, this this Google slide will be shared with you both as a hyperlink as well as another version, PDF or a PowerPoint later on. The ones that you receive as a Google slide, it is hyperlinked throughout. So I'll mention, hey, over here you can connect on something, over here you can connect on something. And so if you do access it, I'd recommend the slide version for that purpose. Now, as we get started, I realize, folks, we have so many folks doing so many different things. We have folks that are doing hybrid 2 or 3 days a week with 1 day off in terms of planning, 2 or 3 days in terms of the students coming. We have some folks probably still doing fully remote. We have probably folks doing hybrid or blended and also remote or fully online. And of course, we have folks doing fully face-to-face. I appreciate that, and I know that, and I know it's very, very complex. And with it, though, one of the efforts that I want to emphasize with this variation that we're doing and where I'm going to focus is that if we're face-to-face, at least in the realities I'm working with schools across the country, is that, and I was just talking to a special educator today in Missouri. She was about half an hour ago, and she was sharing, yeah, Sean, I can't do that because I have to do the IEP goals and benchmarks, and I have X number of minutes to do that every single day. So what we were talking about, which is a virtual reality social skill program, she was saying, I can't do that right now because of the limited time I have, because normally I had this much time, but in the hybrid, the face-to-face, but COVID way, I have less time. I'm rambling on this because what I'm going to share example-wise are how to engage the family, knowing you guys are connecting with family members in lots of different ways. And I just want to recognize that because at times you might be thinking, Sean, you're talking online. No, but I'm talking about the fact that I'm not able to facilitate as much as normal. I'm not able to enrich, embed, reinforce, facilitate, explicitly teach. So instead, I'm looking more to that home environment than I did in the past. All right, enough said. Last thing I will mention is the fact that I will mention Google Classroom a bunch today as our default learning management system. I know many of us are using Seesaw or Canvas or a variety of other things. That's fine. I only mention this to keep it somewhat simplistic, in that if I offer Google Classroom as an example, most likely these same ideas, tools, features exist in your learning management system as well. So we'll just leave it there and we'll move on. All right, so what I wanted to focus in on today is this recognition in this new world of ours that we have, of course, our teacher roles, we have our assistant roles, we have our related service provider roles, and then, of course, we have our parent roles. In our hybrid, and I'm going to get to parent in just a second in terms of our definition, but in our hybrid, blended, fully online, face-to-face, we just have to recognize those roles are changing. And there's a continuum of roles that we are engaging our family members with. And I'll let you guys define what that continuum is. I'm going to give you some suggestions as we go along. So I'm operating, though, under the understanding that there's a bit of a reversal, and reversal may be too strong, but there's definitely some changes going on. And with that, we are increasingly looking to the parent family member, the adult in the home, to be a little bit more of our eyes and ears this academic year than we have in the past. We are looking for them to identify things that are working, some things that are challenges. We're looking for them to determine how that day is going for that child, or how that day went, things of that nature. Again, due to maybe reduced time we have with them face-to-face, due to the fact that we only have them half a week, or due to the fact that they're fully online or online for portions. I'll try not to continue to repeat that, but I just want to reinforce there's that continuum. And the reason being is I'm talking to a lot of educators across lots of different spectrums, and they're all agreeing to the fact that, yeah, this role is changing. All right, so before we go any further, let's give a term. I'm going to refer to folks going forward, that adult in the home environment, as a caregiver. Yes, it could be parent, it could be family member. In the online vernacular, prior to the pandemic, we would call that person the learning coach. And we'll get to the learning coach in just a moment, but we'll go for the moment, the caregiver. So I know you have answers to this, but there's certain individuals since September now that you've identified, or that has kind of progressed into the fact that they're serving in that role. And now, of course, the questions that I hope that you have the answers to is, how are you using that person or persons? How do you communicate with them? How have you planned for that over the summer, or have adjusted for that this year? How are you empowering them? How are you connecting with them? Those are things that I kind of want to have us reflecting a little bit further on, and share with you some things that we know work and that have worked in the past, and that could and should, particularly of parents of children with disabilities that will or can struggle in this type of learning environment. So with that in mind, I want to do a little backward forward thinking. And what I mean by that is that prior to the pandemic, we knew a lot about how to engage parents and the role the caregiver would have in this online environment, or this hybrid environment, or this blended environment. So as we look forward in what we're doing and what we maybe continue to be adjusting with, I want to kind of connect the two. So let me kind of start with the fact that prior to the pandemic, a lot of our interaction, and I know we all vary in this, but historically, or the literature would say this, or the reports would indicate this, is that the school interacts with the home. We disseminate information. We share resources about what's taking place. We talk to them about there's an upcoming meeting. We reach out to family members when there's some challenges in the school environment. But it's generally one way. Or if it's two-way, it's somewhat limited. Or it's two-way at certain times of the year, right before that IEP meeting or right after that IEP meeting or during that 3-year evaluation component. Well, I know all of us have experienced the fact that we've reverted from school home to school home and home school. And that is, it's very much a two-way street, right? So we have, we're changing from just these updates, and instead now it's proactive planning. We're communicating big ideas. We're empowering the variety of stakeholders, the students who we're working with, and of course the adult, the caregiver in the home environment. Yes, Sean, we know this. I'm just recognizing that, and let's move on. So this is where the first hyperlink exists. I want you to know that if you get onto Google Slides, when you have access to this, there's a hyperlink there, Role of Learning Coach, to some good resources that talk to you about in online environments prior to the pandemic. This is how online schools, thousands of teachers, millions of students use the Learning Coach, particularly K through 8, as well as some high school. But I know many of us are using that caregiver in the home. We're communicating with them in a variety of different ways, right? Everything from announcements to what's sitting in the LMS to video conferencing, but communication. And we're expecting the adult in the home environment to communicate with us in a different way. We're also asking them to be a bit organizer in chief. We're asking them to make sure that, you know, those places prior to the pandemic, we're asking them to give a more dedicated spot. Instead of maybe that comfortable couch or that comfortable bed, we're asking them to have a dedicated environment. Maybe it's the desk in the corner of the kitchen. Maybe it's the kitchen table when we're not eating. It could be a variety of different things. We're also asking them to be a bit of a tech operators, right? In terms of problem solving, making sure that camera's on, making sure things are working. And we're also asking them to, when they're doing their homework or they're doing their extended work or they're doing their hybrid work, that we are monitoring, we're restricting distractions, we're making sure the pets are in another part of the house, we're making sure that the phones are turned off or off into a different area. So there's some things we're asking of them. We're asking them to be that master scheduler. And we're trying to, you know, make sure that they're planning with the child and what to complete. We're asking them to prioritize for their student or their child, of course, in terms of what tasks need to be completed today, next day, the next day. We're asking them to readjust things in terms of their schedule. And of course, the caregiver is also balancing out several things in the home along with this. And of course, we've already started to realize we're asking students and the adult in the home to help catch up with some of these lessons, or to continue or complete some of these things that maybe they're not being able to have a chance to complete face-to-face, and they're having to do more at a remote level. We're also asking, and each state is different. I know the Commonwealth is a bit different, but I'll just give you an example here in the Midwest. Several states here in the Midwest said, listen, if you're gonna go fully online, or if you're gonna go hybrid, which most of the environment here is doing that in the Midwest, we have a variety, except in the far western areas, we don't have anyone going fully face-to-face. But in those instances, face-to-face is not as critical. But any hybrid fully online, we're asking the parent, the adult in the home, the caregiver, to be the attendance person. They are checking off the attendance. And it started off actually in Missouri and Kansas, where they actually had to record the minutes. They've since backtracked from that. It took about 3 weeks into the school year for them to backtrack. The State Department got enough calls from parents. But anyways, we are asking the parent to be a bit of a, is the child present for their learning, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lot we're asking for, right? In terms of this caregiver. And yes, there is more. And I know we know there's more. I'll get to the solutions here in just a second. But we're also asking them the caregiver to help monitor some of the comprehension, maybe pull out and do some additional reading, maybe review some of the assignments. We're asking them to encourage, engage, create some empowerment, self-monitor, scaffold, a number of different things we're asking the adult, the caregiver in the home. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, Sean, we're not asking that right now, and yet we may be doing some assumptions. So for example, with executive function skills, we know a lot of our learners struggle with attention, completing on task, being independent, things of that nature. Of course, those of us working with more students with more extensive needs, of course we're asking that of the caregiver. So the big question is, how are we supporting? All right, so overall, of course, and we can go on for this for days, we're asking them to assist, monitor, collect data, preview, a variety of other things. And by the way, this is very typical of effective online learning prior to the pandemic. So please click on one of those links when you have a chance to get information about how they're doing things. And just as a reinforcer, folks, prior to March of 2019, online learning, they would say the adult in the home at the elementary K-5 level would be asking 4 to 6 hours a day for the caregiver to engage with the child online. This is typically developing 2 to 4 hours at the middle school. Let me say that again. Prior to the pandemic, when we were looking at the caregiver, the adult in the home, and fully online learning, schools were looking for parents to be engaged at a level of 4 to 6 hours at the elementary level, 2 to 4 at the middle school level, in order for this to work. I'm not advocating that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just sharing that as a reality. Okay, so here's some things to consider, okay? So I know, again, with the technology watch, we'll look at the Patent Technology Resource Hub. So I'm going to talk more generally about some of these things to be able to cover hybrid, blended, et cetera, as well as the continuous students we serve. First of all, I know many of us are already doing it, but a couple of links for your further consideration. Use that LMS you're working with. Maximize for the adult in the home environment, especially if they have multiple children attending the school district. The fact that let's use that scheduler and the LMS schedule. Let's coordinate it with the calendars. Let's coordinate with the announcements. Let's use how that platform organizes things, and then communicate that to the parents so that you're maximizing everything about information you're sharing, how you're sharing it, where it's housed. Yeah, this is a bit of a duh. For some of us were like, of course, we did this back in September, Sean. And yet what I'm realizing more and more still is that parents are like, wait, I don't know where this information was. I don't know what you're trying to empower me with. I don't know how you've organized things. So we need to be as black and white and as consistent and as clear in utilizing those tools. And there's a lot of tools out there. So for example, hey, let's tie that announcement with this schedule. Let's embed directions in an activity or an assignment. So for example, Google Slides. I'm going to offer a Google Slide as a place for an activity or an assignment or a presentation. I can embed in that, like I can in a number of different types of tools. Google Slides is one. Directions, audio, video, text, visuals. So as I'm going along, it plays along with the slide so the individual knows, the child knows what's supposed to be taking place. Well, the parent will also know as well. They could prompt, they could scaffold, they could further support their child as they're going through this. So those built-in elements. Overall, folks, we are designing for two stakeholders, the adult, the caregiver, and the student. And by the way, when we get feedback, and of course, Google Classroom is awesome for feedback, everything from text to audio to narration to video, etc. Embedded within the assignment, by the way, depending on how we organize Google Classroom and other learning management systems. But think about some of that feedback, not only for your stakeholder, the child, the student you're working with, but also that parent that hopefully that you're directing to listen to that, to better understand what you're trying to facilitate, be it hybrid, fully online, of course, also extending face-to-face. But also make sure that if you are using those tools well, make sure the caregiver understands those tools. You could be fully face-to-face, but you're using the learning management system to coordinate things that you don't have time for now face-to-face with. Make sure you created video snippets. Make sure you've directed through announcements, emails, step-by-step directions, visuals with text to the adult in the home so they understand exactly how you've created things, exactly how you're using it. Folks, as a university professor who's been teaching online for years, I do this regularly with my own students. And these are adults who are very capable, and yet they need to know what I'm envisioning. They need to know how I've mapped things out. I need to be very purposeful. All right, so do that. And again, think about that. And by the way, redundancy is not a bad idea. Think of it also as breadcrumbs. So for example, create a class overview of the ins and outs, the assignment basics, goals for the day, goals for the week. Embed it within your learning management system, even if you're fully face-to-face. Those breadcrumbs will allow folks to get inside your head. Again, the caregivers that are trying to extend, facilitate, support, or implement the hybrid fully online. Those things are vital. For example, a breadcrumb for me is for a given activity, I've created a little video where I've captured the screen of my learning management system and I've walked the user, highlighting the directions, emphasizing elements, walking them through step by step so they can watch that one time, they can watch it 10 times. Even if I'm giving the directions face to face, it's now online in my learning management system. I'm going to do this with lots of different technologies, by the way, to videotape. Camtasia, Screencast, Screencastify, Loom. I know many of you are using lots of different things to capture your screens. I think that's a vital technology of today, is capturing that screen to allow the child you're working with, as well as the caregiver, inside your head about all the supports you've created. Patton has a wonderful tech resource hub that Sarah can reinforce and give a link to with some of these technology tools. Now, video-wise, I think video is my friend. Video is our friend, okay? I can tailor messages, both for the student and the caregiver. I can give some of those explicit instructions that I've had to share in class, but also maybe I can't because of the hybrid fully online. The visual examples, the prompts, the scaffolds, the ability to self-monitor some of those things, the ability to also have the caregiver, I want you to implement it in these steps. Here's a video of me modeling it in these steps. By the way, that's Josh Stock, a phenomenal author of Awesome Sauce about using video in the classroom. It's a nationally published book by ISTE, a bestseller. So I'm giving you his YouTube link to walk you through a lot of his how to use video in the classroom. But also, when we think about video and those types of things, let's think about those virtual office hours. Even if we're fully face-to-face, I want to empower those caregivers at home. So what I'm going to do is not only have virtual office hours on Zoom or WebEx or Google Hangout, but I'm going to create a checklist. I'm going to create a Google form or something where, as a parent, the caregiver is working through the week. They may come up with questions. They may come up with challenges. They may come up with ideas. So I'm going to guide them. So when we have those virtual office hours, they're coming in prepared. They're hitting the ground running. We may start coordinating some of those things so we have these topical virtual hours. And by the way, at the end of these things, well, I'll get to that in just a second, but I'm going to structure things maybe through a Q&A. I want it to be able to be structured so we get through things very effectively and efficiently. And I'm going to record it and post it up on my LMS. And by the way, with some of these primary themes, I'm going to create frequently asked questions. So folks that weren't there, most likely had the same questions. So let's give you the answers, not only the questions, but also the answers. I'm going to place it within my LMS. I'm going to record it. I'm going to edit it. And by the way, editing it because it might be there's some lag time, it might be some in addition information that wasn't too critical. So instead of just putting up an hour virtual office hours, I might chunk it up into, hey, here's a section we talked about this. Here's a section we talked about this. Okay, I'm running out of time, but to me, virtual office hours also, we can start facilitating rooms where we bring together parents that are having similar issues. And we're going to keep things in terms of privacy and all that. And David can talk about that. But what I want to do is I want to empower them, and I want them to connect in that respect. And also I want them to understand that they're not alone in this experience. And I'm going to use virtual office hours for that. So I've got a few more minutes. I'm going to kind of run through several of these things as well. So in addition, I want to empower the caregiver. So I want to empower them through a number of different things. So with this said, I'm going to empower them, first of all, with understanding my big ideas. I want them to understand what the essential goals are. It might be an overview for the week, and I know many of us are already doing that. It may be an overview for the day. It may be assessments for the week. It may be supports that I'm going to provide or we're looking for students to provide. I'm giving you a map, and I'm giving the student a map via this learning management system that I'm going to post, but I'm also giving the caregiver a map as well. And I have a teenager with Down syndrome walking into my classroom right now. And thank you very much, my son, and he will leave here in just a moment. All right, so we're gonna move on here. So we also can, though, empower parents. So for example, as I mentioned with empowering parents, one brief example here, let's say in the past, we would have asked parents to take a chart down of when the child's reading at home at the elementary level, recording the book, recording what they've read, etc. Why wouldn't we also put up in the learning management system instructions about when you're reading with your child, do the following steps. Maybe create some videos to illustrate that. Things of that nature would be awesome. And we can go into that in better detail. So there's a number of different things I want to get into, and I have run out of time. But the couple last thoughts here, and this empowering the parents, is that we want to make sure that, one, as I mentioned, we're using the learning management system well. We're thinking of things very purposely we're going to create. We're thinking of how they'll help the child, the student that we're working with, but also the caregiver that's home facilitating and working in whatever process we've tried to develop for them. We're going to make sure that the big ideas, we're decluttering so they understand exactly essentially what we're working on, and then they're able to then facilitate that and support. Now we can do this with a range of technology tools as educators. everything from, as I mentioned, video to record the desktop, to editing tools, to checklists we're going to create, to knowing our learning management system and all the tools it offers, and incorporating those elements within our learning management system, and then using those well. So with that said, there's some other things I have not gotten to, but I want to give David his time. And please realize, oh, one last thing I do want to mention in terms of this, in terms of David. Well, no, I won't have enough time. I'm sorry. I'm going to let David go. I don't do well in terms of going first. I do better in terms of following, but go ahead, David, it's all yours. And I'm going to go ahead and escape out of this and stop sharing, and it's your turn to go.
Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate the opportunity and I appreciate what's going on. It's hard to follow you, so I'll do what I can as a part of this. But I'm going to start talking about just issues with working with parents to provide faith, and some issues that have come up just in the past week or two as I've worked with districts across the state, and issues such as this. But before I begin, I just want to make sure that, Sean went through his slides rather quickly. I strongly encourage you to go back and look at all the wealth of resources that he has provided for you. There is a wealth of information there that just, I think you need to digest and absorb. And so he just kind of gave you a taste of it. Go back and absorb it. And I think it will work to help improve it, your lives, but also the lives of children with disabilities. So keep that in mind as a part of this. So, but before I get into the specifics, let me just talk about this, is that our obligations, I just want to make clear important considerations, and I think you've actually seen me show this slide previously, is that these 6 things, of which 5 and 6 kind of go together, but we need to focus on for all kids and all staff, safety and health. And so that you're not creating a super spreader event at your school. You need to do everything you can to do this and make sure that what you're doing is still keeping everyone safe. I'm going to talk about actually lines on NORPs in a few minutes, and then some specifics as we talk about compliance with the law and what are our obligations and to provide FAPE and things such as this, but just some issues such as that. But I can't emphasize enough that whatever you're doing is that you need to document every single thing you're doing and document it and keep track of what's going on. I've been in contact with, I was in contact with multiple districts today who have been saying that they're not, they need to come up with better documentation. Sticky notes are great, but you need to make sure that you have it in a central file. And there's some great apps for the iPad, great apps for the iPhone that you can share across districts. Google Notes are going really well. Just document whatever you can. But the last 2, again, be creative and don't stop trying. Don't just give up. Don't just give up. And that's something that I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes is not giving up and sharing with us. So what I just want to emphasize here is just that 2020 has been strange, and it just keeps getting stranger. I mean, right before here, this is being recorded live. For those of you who are aware of what's going on, or just listening to what's going on with the governor in Michigan. So we are live as we speak, as we talk about where we are with this. So keep this in mind as we address this, okay? But just, it'll be fun, yeah, all right. Remember, what is our obligation? Our obligation as districts is to make sure that the kids are receiving a free, appropriate public education. That is what we need to do. And that is what we need to make sure that kids are getting appropriate education. And that as part of that education is that the children are making progress on their goals and objectives. So that is something that we have to do this. Now, what I'm going to address as a part of this is sometimes difficult because there's some disputes and there's some disagreements about what is appropriate and what the district thinks is appropriate for a child versus what the parents think is appropriate. So we're going to talk very specifically about this and address some of these things. And there are some parents who do want their kids to receive more education at home, which I will address in a second, while there are some other parents who don't want their kids to receive education at home. I took this picture on the road between Carlisle and Newville just the other day. There's obviously some parent who wants their kid not there. So for those who understand exactly where this was, it was just right outside of the suburb, in the suburbs of Plainfield. So but it is interesting to talk about this, well, as much as there are suburbs of Plainfield, but just to address these things like this, okay? So just talk about this. Let's talk about what were our obligations, okay? Just to reiterate the obligations, what we have is the process is, this is what we have. And so suppose, and just play this out. You've reviewed the PLAF with the parents. You've discussed the needs of the child, things like this. And you feel like you as a district have addressed the needs and the goals or SDIs of the child. You've gone through, you've come up with a good IEP for the kid, and you say, we want things like this, and this is what we need to address things like this, all right? And as a team, as a district team, not just the parent as part of the team, but as just as the district, what you then recommend is programming in the school, or a hybrid version of the school, or virtual programming in the school. And virtual programming that is provided where the kids log on is part of this. And again, use the resources that Sean talked about to address these things like this. And the parent rejects this. And the parent rejects this. And this, the recommendations I'm going to be talking to you as a part of this go not just for the pandemic, but apply to whenever parents reject this. And so what I want to make sure that you understand is that the parent rejects this, and there could be a variety of reasons why a parent might reject this. The first thing you need to do is you need to not panic, okay? Need to not panic and not be the one who goes, what's going on, and think about where we are with this. So just don't automatically assume that what you have to do is panic about what are we going to do with this? What the parents rejected. There are some clear strategies and clear steps to do this. Been doing this for years, so let me just walk you through where we are with this. And this talk about this, okay? On why the parent might be rejected. Is it not enough education for the child? What I'm seeing very specifically is parents concerned about the safety of the child, that they don't feel it's safe for the child to come to school. It's not safe, or that they have a doctor's note. That is a doctor's note that says that the child should only receive education in the home. So, and many of your districts have addressed this and have seen this. And these are not pandemic specific rejections. These are rejections that districts do have, and these are things we need to think about. So when I talk about this, it's not enough, it's safety, whatever the doctors know, what we have here is a part of this. Keep this in mind. So before we start going down the road about steps to do, let me give you some advice. Let me give you some advice about words not to use. Just some words not to use. Okay. First, and just phrases here. I've got 2 pages of this, and this is slides that we have uploaded so that you should be able to access these. We want what's best for your child. Just to remind you, and this may seem counterintuitive, our obligation in special education is to offer appropriate education. We're not offering best for the kid. So we just do not use the word best. Best would become a superlative race that you would never ever win. It'd just be constantly changing, constantly saying. So don't say this. Second thing, this is what we have to offer. Don't just draw a line in the sand. Don't just draw a line in the sand saying this is the only thing we're offering, and therefore if we need to go to mediation or due process. And neither one, though ODR does a great job of trying to with facilitated IEPs and mediation, I don't recommend due process as a former hearing officer. Okay, and another thing not to say is I don't know about this year's budget. I don't know about this year's budget. Don't say that, or we can't do that, or we can't afford that. These are not phrases, these are phrases not to say. And I really mean this. So if a parent rejects what you say, just don't use these phrases. Wait, there's more, okay? As I said a minute ago, don't use best, right? Don't use the word best to describe the program that we're going to be offering. Just this is the best, no, don't do it. Or that's the way we do that. Don't say that. Don't start the phrases that way. Or we've always done it that way. Just do not do these things. I can't tell you how many times as part of witness prep, we've gone there and said people have done these. Also, do not vote on the IEP. I've got horror stories relating to that. Don't also say, this is the minimum. No, we're not offering the minimum, we're offering appropriate. And also we're not emphasizing this is the full or highest potential. We're not trying to get the kid to their full highest potential. We're offering appropriate. Wait, I've got more words not to say. okay? So let's talk about working with families. I mean, these are words not to say, we're not trying to maximize. Don't say won't. Don't say can't. Don't talk about funds, money, budget. And one word that you never say, pun completely intended there, is never say never. Right? Never say never. Okay? Don't say we never do that. Just do not say that, things like this. All right? But words, so keep these words in mind, is about words not to say when you're encountering parents and there's difficulty and disputes about how to do the programming for the kids. But words to say. Words to say. These are very clear, okay? Very clear. Make sure that you talk about the program that you're offering for the child is individualized to the child. It's not individualized to the disability, it's individualized to the child. Just to remind you that all those disability labels are umbrella terms. And so what we have to focus on is making sure what we're doing for the kid is individualized to the child. And we need to focus on that one, okay? Other things you need to say, that you fully considered all the options. You fully considered all the options out there. And you want to address where you are with this, but you fully considered what's going on, and this is things, all right? Next, these words kind of go about where we are with this, is the program that we're offering we feel is appropriate for the child. We feel is appropriate, right? And let's just stop right there. Individualized, fully considered and appropriate. These are terms that you actually should use, and you shouldn't just give lip service to these terms. These are terms that you really should mean it when you say it, that the program that you're offering for the child is individualized to the child, that you truly, fully considered all the options, that you fully considered, and that the program you're offering is appropriate. So just saying these terms, no, just saying, no, that's not it. I really mean this. Don't just say these things. Make sure when you say these things that you truly mean these terms for the kid. And you have these terms about this. So make sure that you have this and you use these. But also, whatever a parent requests, and I don't care whatever the parent requests, whatever a parent requests, you need to make sure that you consider what that you say, we will consider that as an option. We will consider that as an option. But what we're looking for is we're trying to get the child so that the child makes meaningful progress, okay? And that's what our focus is. That's what our focus is. So keep that in mind. But also, this is the plan that we feel is appropriate. And talk about this and just describe why you feel this plan is appropriate. But no matter what the parent requests, truly no matter what the parent requests, make sure you say, we will consider that request. And truly consider that request. I mean, I've been in multiple very contentious IEP meetings where parents have asked for what we feel is it might be unique or different. And you go in the other room and talk as a team and really look at this. Does the child need this? Are we addressing these things? Or is it something that we should strongly consider? Things like this. Don't just go in the other room and talk about the plans you have for golfing for the weekend and then go back and say, oh, we considered it. No, go truly fully consider the request and pay attention to this and pay attention to this. So let's go back to the scenario. You have offered a program for a child. You feel the program either in school, hybrid, or completely virtual, and the parents have rejected this, okay? So because they have a doctor's note or they have something where they say that we want to have the child receive all of their education in the home. And I'm working with a district right now that has taken great steps on this. And so I just want to let you know that there are some districts out there who are dealing with this and trying to pay attention to this. The topics that I have here were considered addressed before I started working with some of these districts on these, okay? So what are the steps you need to take? Well, let's go to it. Let's talk about the NORP. And just for those of you anyone from out of state who don't know what a NORP is, I'm not going to tell you. NORP is a Pennsylvania specific term. No other state, from what I've been able to tell, has what we refer to as a NORP. Other states have what we refer to as PWN, a prior written notice. So steps you need to take. If parents have whatever your option is, whatever you are recommending, make sure you pay attention to box 2 and box 7. And pay attention to the description of the action proposed or refused by the LAA and the educational placement recommended for your child is. Why is this important? Because you are offering a program. You are offering a program for the child. And this is the program you as a district feels good. So you still have to offer the program. You still have to offer the program. And I know there's a lot of discussion out there about the use of waivers. I'm not advocating waivers. I'm advocating the use of NORPs. So keep this in mind. So first thing is make sure that you, in box 2 and box 7, you clearly articulate the program that you're offering. And make sure that this is the program you're offering, things like this, and keep that in mind, all right? So this is the first step that you do. Step 2, okay? Now in box 6 of the NORP, make sure that you talk about other factors relevant to the LEA's proposal or refusal. So why actually are you recommending this? Why are you actually truly recommending this? So this is, so you have to make sure that the program that you are offering for the parent, this is a work, you want to work with the parents. This is, we're not talking about being, this is a shared responsibility, but you as a team, there may be a dispute between what you feel is necessary and what the parents feel is necessary. So keep this in mind when you talk about this. Just make sure that you talk about in box 6 of the NORP, clearly the factors relevant to the LEA's proposal or refusal. Keep that in mind. So what we mean by this is, so the parents may have gone to a doc in the box or got a doctor's note that says that the child can only receive education in the home, things like this. The first thing it's 3 basic, very, very important steps here. 3 very important steps. First is, whenever you get a doctor's note, I absolutely implore you to take it seriously. You're working to support these children, and you think you now have a doctor's note. I mean, the whole series that we have every month is supporting children with disabilities in a virtual environment. You have a doctor's note that says that the child needs to be in a virtual environment. You need to take this very, very seriously and pay attention to this. Second thing, always, whenever you get a doctor's note, seek permission to discuss with the doctor or the healthcare professional about the specifics and other questions. Get permission so that you can clarify precisely what the district's obligations are, what would be the opportune way for doing this, are there ways to address this, and talk about the options that you have presented and see what their thoughts are on this, but make sure you seek permission to discuss with the doctors so you can clarify precisely what's going on there. And the third thing, just to remind you, is there is a difference between educational and medical suggestions. You as districts are educational professionals, right? Doctors don't like it when you make medical recommendations, just like when we don't like it when doctors make educational recommendations. So yes, you are on notice. And previously we talked about KUSK, when you knew or should have known. When doctors make a recommendations, you need to take this very seriously. You need to pay attention to this. So whenever a doctor makes an educational recommendation, you are under advisement. When a doctor makes a medical suggestion, you follow it. You follow it. So you're under advisement, but you as a team are the ones who have to make the determination about educational programming placement for the child, because you are the educational experts. Pay attention to what they say. Truly, fully consider what they write, but pay attention to what they say and keep that in mind as a part of this, okay? So health considerations, okay? Considerations, so the parent is requesting that the child receive education in the home. So what you have to think about is the health and safety and staff concerns. Is it safe? Is it safe? Is it safe? Is it something that's an option for what's going on with these kids? And that's something that we need to think about. Is there a way that we can encourage the parents to receive some of the education virtually and participate in this? Is it a Wi-Fi issue? Is it a computer issue? Is it is it a log-on issue? There are some kids out there who have difficulty logging on. So pay attention to this, but also the logistical issues of going into a home and the safety issues was relating to this. There are some strong considerations that you need to pay attention to as a part of these kinds of things. If you can rule out some of these things, then pay attention to this, okay? Keep these in mind as we talk about this, okay? But some issues relating to health and safety factors for medically fragile and immunocompromised students, okay? Review the students' health care plans and determine any potentially harmful effects that may result from the return to in-person instruction and risk of exposure to COVID-19. Just as a team, you should be doing this. You should have done this already. If a student is at higher risk of infection or severe illness, the team may consider remote learning or homebound instruction. Yeah, obviously. If a student with a health-related needs will return to in-person instruction, the team should consider if any additional precautions are needed relating to cleaning and PPE. So these are just basic steps you need to consider as a part of this for all medically fragile and compromised things, okay? So back to the, go back to the norm, okay? For instruction in the home. So when if parents has previously rejected the previous norm where you offer the program in the school, hybrid or virtual, now the parents are demanding only instruction in the home. What is the next step? The step is you offer another norm. Another norm. You've offered a norm, parent has rejected this, instruction in the home. Make sure on the second norm that you clearly mark box 3. Explanation of why the LEA proposed or refused to take the action. And this we highlight where it probably like very specifically that the parent is, we were going to provide instruction in the home because the parents rejected the other norms, something along those lines. So keep this in mind, but we have to keep this documented as a part of this. All doctor's notes. So no matter how frequently or what the doctor's notes say, is that you should have a district policy, not just for this kid, but a district policy that doctor's notes don't go beyond 45 days, that you need a doctor's note just to clarify. Homebound is a temporary situation. It's a temporary setting. It is, yes, it's on like on our continuum, but it's viewed as a temporary thing. The opportunity for kids to participate with their non-disabled peers is extremely limited. And it's something that you need to pay attention to as a part of this. And you need to factor in is that, so we, as a result of the Gaskins lawsuit, which happened just a few blocks from my house, is we have different rules relating to LRE than any other state in the nation. So review all doctor's notes. You should have a district policy of every 45 days to address this and pay attention to this. So keep this in mind, things like this. So specifics about homebound instruction. Some very specifics about homebound instruction that you need to pay attention to. And so please share with others as a part of this, okay? This is a decision about placement. This is a decision solely about placement. And I'm not going to just remind you that the placement decisions in IEP meetings are the very last decisions we make about any child. It's as a result of after reviewing the PLAP, the goals, the STIs, and transition statements, the placement decision is the very last thing. Is the student really confined to the home? These are questions you need to pay attention to. And is it really happening? Things like this, all right? And why did the doctor recommend this? And this goes back to the statement I had just a few minutes ago about individuals who are medically fragile or immunocompromised. Keep that in mind as a part of this, okay? Just to remind you, I said this before, I'm saying it again, I feel comfortable in this. Doctors cannot prescribe homebound. It is an IEP team decision. It is an IEP team decision. The IEP team is the deciding on this because the IEP team is making educational decisions about a child. So you have to think about this. And just to remind you that prior to COVID, many kids who were on homebound instruction did not get their instruction in the Commonwealth in their home. I live in Carlisle. There was a number of kids who received instruction in the Carlisle library, not in their home afterwards, after school. So keep this, it's an IEP team decision. But strongly consider any supplementary aids and services that can be provided to the child and see what can be done to help the child as a part of this. Keep this in mind as we address these kinds of things and pay attention to where we are at this, okay? So keep also, next question, can the child participate in other activities? Can the child go to a job as a part of a transition program? Can the child go shopping? Is it truancy if the child's only home? Things like this. And then avoids rules relating to extracurriculars. I mean, with the opportunity for a child to participate in extracurricular activities, we have to think about this because there's some kids who are on homebound instruction and because of medical issues, and so we have to keep in mind what can we do as a part of it to keep them participating. Okay, more on this. What services? So first, we need to think about the services that we're actually going to provide if we go into the child's home. Make sure first we reduce all risks to the child. Now, I previously said make sure that the staff and safety of the issue of the individuals are taken care of, but keep this in mind, reduce risk to the child. Is it frequent breaks? Is the child on chronic pain? Do we need an adjusted workload? Are there alternative tests, personalized instruction? What are these things we need to take in mind as part of this? These questions don't just apply to COVID. These questions apply to all kids. whenever there's a request for homebound instruction. So keep this in mind, and keep this in mind for future things when we go back to the new normal, okay? Address concerns, okay? Address concerns, but schooling matters, as does the location. I previously stated about how schooling matters, as does the location, but we need to think about this as a part of this, is schooling is not just the education provided by a teacher, it's also all the instruction and interactions with their peers. And as I said before, homebound instruction, yes. It's an interesting part of this is we have to think about this and pay attention to this as we do this, okay? Keep this in mind. But why? What would it take to get the student back in school? Well, seriously, strongly consider what would it take to get the student back in school, okay? Keep this in mind as we address this. And so when we're talking about this, is it school phobia? Is it health? Is it a medical health service? What can we do to help get this kid back in school? And keep considering this, and keep this as a part of the discussions, and keep this as part of the factors that we're considering for this kid. And so keep that in mind as well. Okay. Quickly, I've got some homebound tips for doing things like this. Keep that in mind.
Hey, Dr. Bateman, as you're,
yes.
and I hate to do this, but we do have a question, and I think it's really relevant as you give your tips. Could you clarify, as you're giving your tips, the difference between homebound versus quote unquote instruction in the home? Is there a difference? And if so, what is that?
Yeah. Let me. I'll get that in a second. Thanks. I appreciate the question. So, and get to that and answer that. So let me give some quick tips, and I'll take care of that. And get to you on that, and so address that. Okay, kids are still entitled to FAPE. And it's part of the continuum. So keep that in mind as we talk about. But the big difference, and as we talk about this as part of the continuum, the most important difference between instruction conducted in the home and homebound instruction is that homebound instruction is not a special education placement, while instruction conducted in the home is a placement made by the IEP team. And so if any of you are looking for additional guidance on that, is that there is a basic education circular on that. So go to type in BAC PDE, instruction conducted in the home. If I remember correctly, it came out, I remember this came out in September of 1997. So it's something that is a part of this. I do not have the BECs memorized. I just had my law class go through the BECs. So don't give me any more credit than I deserve. Things like this. There's a difference. Again, I'll say it again. The most important difference between instruction conducted in the home and homebound instruction is that homebound instruction is not a special education placement, while instruction conducted in the home is a placement made by the IEP team. Hence the NORP, hence the implementation of the NORP and things like this, okay? So what we have as part of this is instruction, the instruction we're talking about is the type, the timing, and the frequency of this, all right? So keep this in mind as we address this, is make sure that you're working to help the kid make progress. That's what we're doing. So what we need as teams is to determine progress and give frequent updates, notices from others, and then when to transition back, okay? So keep this in mind as a part of this, okay? But it's something that we need to continually monitor as we address this. Keep this in mind as things like this. But what have been provided for you may have provided services like this for non-identified kids. Some of you may have had kids who've had a car accident in the past, and you've had to provide services. So it's important to keep in mind as we address this. But one thing I want to keep in mind as a part of this is, and this is kind of a concluding summary on this, is option of last resort. That's why the initial NORP of what the IEP team from the district feels is appropriate for the child. Make sure that you clarify in the correct boxes of your NORP what you feel is appropriate for the child. And that also that it's temporary, and as we should in the Commonwealth, keep in mind least restrictive environment for kids. We have an obligation to provide education for kids in the least restrictive environment as absolute much as possible. And we do have a higher standard than other states. We truly do. And so we have to keep this in mind and keep this, again, it's an option of last resort. So for those of you who have questions or concerns, here is my email address. And again, I have my Twitter and Facebook feed. Those are where I put off a lot of free resources. We won't try to sell you anything as a part of this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it back. I'm going to stop my screen sharing and turn it back over to Sarah. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And David, you're incredible. As soon as you started to rattle that off, I was Googling and I found it, and it is linked in the chat box, and it is linked in our shared notes, that Beck. So it was very easy to find. Thank you so much for hitting on that. I know I threw off your cadence a little bit, but boy, did you jump back quick. It's definitely timely on that, leading off of what Dr. Bateman was mentioning. The fine folks at Patton's Family Engagement Initiative have culled a few highlights just regarding family engagement in general, not specifically associated with in-home or virtual instruction, but the general logistics of that and those baseline guidances with the why and what's determining that. So this slide, as well as the information pertaining to each of those items from IDEA all the way down to component 4A of the PA systems for principal effectiveness, there are extra notes for each of those 4 or 5 things in the shared notes as well. So if you want a refresher on all things family engagement, there's a refresher. And if you really want to get into that, we would love to put you in touch with the Family Engagement Initiative. As we wrap up this afternoon, we every month the time flies by, but we will have another one next month, and we hope that you'll join us. As we're wrapping up today, we've mentioned the Tech Resources Hub. There is a link in our shared notes doc that is a accessible Google sheet that is hyperlinked to the GILs with resources pertaining to a lot of the things that Dr. Smith mentioned about accessibility with learning management systems, resources for creating screencasts, all of those great things that you could use not only with your students, but also the families that you're engaging in the home. So we hope that you'll check that out. We also, in addition to that, our team at Patton is available for on-call support, technical assistance. So if you're just getting started with maybe using Google Classroom in a specific way for your students, or you'd like to discuss how you can engage your parents with some of those technology resources, you can schedule a time to meet with one of the members of our team. And we also have monthly sessions blocked off for live kind of tech help. So if you can imagine a kind of a geek squad or a tech desk that is specifically focused on how to use technology tools to support virtual environment instruction for students with disabilities, that's what we're here for. So take advantage of us. As we wrap up, the attendance link should be live at this point, and I'm pretty sure Ethan has dropped it into the chat window in case you want to just click on that hyperlink. So if you're in need of Act 48 credit, we hope that you'll fill out that form. And as always, we include a little question to see maybe what you'd like to hear from our featured guests and others in our next session. So you'll see there the November 12th session is TBD, because we like to get that feedback from everybody pertaining to topics of interest. I don't see, let's see, I want to check we've got 2 minutes left. So I want to check the question and answer box. Gentlemen, anything else? You did great today, just flying through that time. Any last, anything that maybe didn't come to mind originally? We're good?
I don't have anything, but I appreciate the offer. And again, if we do sincerely take the comments sincerely about issues that you need to have addressed. The comments that I talked about specifically relating to NORPS, those came directly from questions and concerns that districts have presented to us. So please, if there's things that are topics, concerns, issues that need to be addressed, please let us know.
Yeah, ditto to that. And the only other thing that, to me, as folks leave from me, is this idea of how do we empower those caregivers so that they can help facilitate what we're trying to do. And it's very difficult for what we're trying to do right now. So in any way, shape, or form, Do not take this as adding to, but rather how do we empower so they can facilitate and further support what we're trying to do for their children. So hopefully those ideas and what was left on that slide deck that I did not cover was helpful. So.
And we've already had several people specifically reach out. We have linked, Dr. Smith, the hyperlinked version of your slide deck within our shared notes. So everyone has a chance to see it's always a scavenger hunt of goodies when you share slides with us. It's always fun to go through and see everything that's linked there. Well, gentlemen, thank you both again for joining us this month. And we will definitely be interested to see that attendance data and that feedback from today's participants. And as always, participants, as you're finishing up your attendance and you're signing off with us today, just a friendly reminder, if you haven't already joined the Schoology course for all things SSDVE, the Schoology course is kind of the one big housing unit for all of our past recordings, the treasure trove of resources that are hyperlinked, and other additional resources that we come across throughout the course of the month in between these monthly webinars. So there's information about the Schoology course in today's session notes as well. But if you've finished your attendance, please feel free to kind of log off, and we'll see you next month. If you have any issues with attendance, you can reach us at that Best Practices Online email address that's presented there, bestpracticesonline@patent.net. And have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you all for joining us.